Here's what happened. I started as an entrepreneur in 2014. I was a DJ and I did the college party scene for a bit. And then I got into what I call the spaghetti phase, which is figuring shit out for my life, for my career. I got into event organizing, which led me to my 2018 burnout after the 500-person social media conference. From there, after my burnout, I got into consulting for a small business for social media work. And then I also led guided meditation classes in person. From there, the pandemic hits. And now I'm like, shit, financially, like, what am I going to do? I can't support myself. Mentally and physically, I'm in a rough place for my health. So I moved back in with my parents. And all of a sudden, that's a big change that just happened. And with that, I got to figure out, do I continue down this path of entrepreneurship? Also, I got to figure out new habits to implement living back with my parents as a late 20-something. And then what I realized was from there, I got into contract work for an endurance company. And I continued to focus on my public speaking and my storytelling. That's been that journey was like nearly 10 years coming to where it is today for this podcast and this mission. But in those years, there was a lot of change that happened. And with that change came a lot of messiness and a lot of frustration and awkwardness. But what I want to tell you is that change is going to happen. And it can feel even faster right now for you. So if you understand that change is something that naturally is going to happen, and you can understand the change itself, it makes it way less scary for you to navigate and move through. So that's why I want to talk about how embracing the messy phase of life prevents burnout. This is Make Burnout Extinct. I'm Robert David Weeks. The problem I'm getting into today is thinking life isn't supposed to be messy, that you're supposed to have it perfect in your life. And I know how exciting that could be of like, yes, it's going to be perfect. It's going to be amazing. It's going to be incredible all the time. But that doesn't happen as you're growing as a human being. You're going to then, through growth, face challenge, and from there, create messiness in your life. And when we can accept this as a reality, what happens is it can help decrease then the stress and the overwhelm that builds up through the mental chatter that can come up of beating ourselves up because we think we're doing something wrong when it's messy and chaotic and awkward. Not realizing that this is just a temporary phase in life. So how you embrace the messy phase of life is realizing that this is something that happens. And again, it could be because of comparison, where you've compared online and you see people talking about their successes and their wins, and they may even be like literally saying how easy it is and saying how it happened overnight, which a lot of times is bullshit. People lie. And then there's this other side where in person, you've had that moment of conversation in person where people are like, oh yeah, life's fine. It's all good. But then maybe if you ask more questions or you get more of a one-on-one time, you get one-on-one time with them, you may learn that there's more mess in the life, more chaos. So I want to tell you right off the beginning of this conversation that life is going to be messy. As you're growing towards who it is you want to become, the vision you have for your life, wanting a better life for yourself, it is going to get messy because you're going to be facing challenge. And that's where and with change through the challenge, the messiness comes up. Now, what I want to do with today's conversation is to help you navigate that messy phase, to be able to make it easier to embrace. And how I want to do that is, first, I want to connect this to burnout even more with you. I then want to share with you my own experience with a habit, specifically my workout habit, and that journey that I feel is going to be so helpful for you. And then I want to get into more of understanding the spaghetti phase, understanding the distinctions that come with this spaghetti phase. And then I want to share with you with the body, like what's coming up with the body and the body sensations through the messy phase, so that you can recognize those signals from your body and be like, oh shit, like this is the messy phase. Like I can decrease my stress and my overwhelm because this is something that comes up naturally. And it makes it a lot easier then to continue to move through it and get to the next phase of life. So let me kick it off with the connection to burnout. When you don't accept something that is going to naturally come up, it can create an open loop for your body. So change happens. You've experienced that. I think of as an example, a breakup or getting into a relationship. That is a change. And with that, how I want to direct this conversation today is with that, you have habits that you which are behaviors that you do on repeat. These habits, there have been certain ones that you've had before this relationship that you may some of them you may have to let go of, some of them you may have to change, others, new ones you may have to add in. So one that comes up is cooking. Like, you may have to change how you cook with certain foods if that your partner likes that you may not like. Also with your morning walk, you may have a set time that you're doing a morning walk, but maybe that could be your connection time with your partner, and you could cuddle in bed instead. So things are going to have to change when it comes to or when it comes to your habits. They're going to change through transitions in life. And we all have these transitions in life. You think back to when you were a little kid to where you are now. I mean, life's different. So with that, when we're resistant to accepting that, it opens up this unnecessary stress bubble and overwhelm bubble, because then you get into this mental chatter of beating yourself up, of thinking there's something wrong with what you're doing, because they're thinking, why is it not easier? Why is it not? Why am I not perfect with this? Well, because it's new. And that's really important to remember. It is new. Change creates newness in your life. I don't know if that's a word, but I'm just using it. There is a lot of excitement that comes with something new and different. And it's definitely not boring, but it does get messy and awkward to figure out how you're going to add this into your daily life. And that is the phase of life that is natural. So let me connect this to my workout habit. For me, 2021, I struggled with, I remembered, I went to my brother's place, I went to his gym in his garage, and I tried to do one pull-up. I could not do it. And I've shared that story before where I was like, shit, like I'm at this point in my life. I had played 3 sports in high school. I was in a fraternity in college. So for me, like working out was a big thing in college, of just staying consistent with all the partying that happened. But now to get to this point in 2021 in my late 20s and I can't do one pull-up, like shit, it was rough. I remember getting the phone out and recording the video and saying, I'm going to make a change, and I'm going to make it a habit to work out daily, knowing that it's not going to be perfect, but I'm committed to that. I'm doing 100% commitment. So what happened with that was a new habit. I'm about to implement a new habit that comes with messiness and a challenge to figure out how I'm going to implement this in my day. I didn't know it at the time, but I was about to enter the messy phase for this habit and my life. What I noticed along the way was I tried a bunch of different things. Like I tried, okay, I'm going to do this at a certain time every day to work out. That didn't work for me. And if you're like me, where your mind my mind pins balls all over the place, I get bored if it's same time every day. I need to figure out, varieties are really important for me. So what I realized, in a way that can help you to embrace the messy phase of life, is to be able to have flexibility for when you are doing certain habits. And how I like to think about it is as a tornado. Thinking general, you think of the cloud that the storm cloud that the tornado is coming from, and then how it goes into this, like, oh man, the word's slipping right now, but like this column down to the ground. It's going from general to then specific and narrow thinking. So you can bring that into your habits of giving yourself flexibility. And one of those is time, when you're going to do a certain habit, like working out. And a way that helps me to remind me of flexibility when I get started with something is saying, put the rep in before bed. I've taught about that before. To stick with it for consistency without the added pressure of having to have a specific time to get started, I say to myself, put the rep in before bed. Not literally, but just I remember, like, this is the theme of be committed to getting it done today, but have the flexibility with responsibilities that I have with, if it's traveling to work, like life gets messy. And so being able to have that type of flexibility has been super helpful for me to embrace that messy phase with this habit. And then from there, it's remembering with a tornado, like adding a new habit in, it can then mess up a lot of things in your day-to-day life. And that is where the spaghetti phase comes in. Because it might be something that's helping you to move towards who it is you want to become and a better life and the vision you have for your life. But then certain things that you've been doing regularly that may not be so helpful for you or supportive of you are going to get messed up and destroyed potentially. So I like to think about that with the tornado and that line of thinking of go from general to then narrow and specific. And that's where you can get into for how I did with my workout was I started with like, anytime like any type of movement is a workout in my book. So for me, that's how what I considered a workout. And so I could then go from, okay, let me just get outside for a few minutes and that's my movement and that's my workout for the day. But then I could start to add more options in where I could do, okay, I'm going to do an ab workout. I'm going to then focus on corrective exercises. I'm then going to get into doing, more of like HIIT style training. But how I started with was I just got to get movement in. And that was another way to think of general to then narrow thinking with this habit. And you can do that for any other habits in your life. If working out is one of them for you, you can take this idea, but you can implement this in this general to specific thinking in other different types of habits as well. So when you can remember that, it's really helpful to then just embrace this messy phase and be able to move through the messy phase. And that's what I want to remind you of, is that it is a phase. It's temporary. And so a way that you can remember this is understanding that there's a challenge zone and then a safety zone for your life. In any area of life, and especially in transition, you're going to experience the challenge zone. So that challenge zone is the breakup. The breakup happens. You are now challenged with, what do I do? And it can feel like there's a lot of growth that happens in that phase. But with that comes a lot of messiness. And what's important is to continue to move through that messiness, and that's relying on your habits. But then you're going to get to this other zone called the safety zone, the comfort zone. That's where the dust settles. After the breakup, that's where you've figured out where you're going to move to. That's figuring out, okay, do I need to change my job? Like you figured out your new job. Like you then get into this safety zone, this comfort zone. And it's really important to remember that life is like those two zones. How I think about it for the phases is you have the momentum phase, which is where the messy phase is, where you are moving towards who it is you want to become. You got a lot of things going for you. It can feel exciting and energizing, but also very chaotic and messy. And then you have this maintenance phase where it is that safety zone. And how I've explained it that it can help you is thinking about it like a race car. You have a race car going around this racetrack super fast. I think of like Formula One. They're racing, they're moving super fast. That is the momentum phase. It's chaotic. I mean, you got to weave through different cars and figure out around the turns. Like there's a lot going on, and there can be crashes that happen and a lot of mess. But then the car eventually has to come back into the pit stop. And that is the maintenance phase, where you got a team checking in on the tires, on the fuel. That is the safety zone for you, and that phase where you're able to feel safe and feel like you now have this habit that was once in the messy phase implemented into your daily life. That's where I go back to the Burnout Proof playbook and having your set burnout proof habits that support you to make sure that you're not hitting burnout. But whenever you're first starting a new habit, you will go into the momentum phase and that messy phase that's within that. So now to get into the body sensations, I want to talk about what the body feels like in the messy phase so that you can make it a lot easier to embrace it, because you can recognize it and be like, all right, shit, okay, cool. That's just something that can happen as I'm creating new habits. Some of the body sensations, and I've talked about this before, is this feeling of pressure in the body. It feels this resistance to want to continue to show up and put a rep in for a new habit. Let's say the workout, showing up and being consistent with your workout. So it can feel like you freeze, like you're pushing against an imaginary wall for your body. And what can bubble up because of that is, I think of either tantrum vibes. So there can be a lot of anger, a lot of frustration, a lot of, I don't want to do this. And then there could be the rebel teenager vibes. What is happening in the body for the awareness is that your body is feeling unsafe because it's something new. It's a new habit that's being implemented. So naturally, the body is going to resist it. And that's where this messy phase can come up, because the body wants to keep you safe. That's the focus. And when something new comes in, that can then create uncertainty for your future and the new path that you're moving down towards. And just recognizing that resistance doesn't mean you have to stop or take a break or don't show up, but just to recognize that the body will naturally resist, having that awareness can actually just allow your stress levels to decrease, allow the overwhelm to decrease. So then you can show up, it can be easier to show up and put the rep in for the new habit. So awareness is really important for all of this to help you out. Now, when you feel that pressure in the body and you feel yourself either pushing against this imaginary wall, or you feel like this rebel teenager or this tantrums building, that is a lot of energy that is built up in your body that needs to be released out. It's the tension that builds up. If that doesn't get addressed, it moves you towards that first red flag of burnout, which is the chronic exhaustion, because you've created all these open loops of tension, and that's either going to get stuck in the body or it's going to be able to release out in some way. So some ways that I have released them out, going back to frustrations I had with my new habits, was I would scream in a pillow. That is something I want to highlight as something that, like, to scream, to let it out. I think of, you score a touchdown or you score a goal in a game. Like, I think about sports, like it's normalized, like, oh, it's okay to scream and like let out the excitement and the energy. But when it comes to feeling frustrated and feeling this pressure from the body of resistance, it doesn't feel like there's a normalization of that. And I want to just tell you, like, you can scream that energy out. You can use a pillow if you don't want to make it an intense noise, or you got a lot of people around, you can use that pillow to scream into it. Or you can just go outside and just like scream, like you see it in the shows, like one of your favorite shows. I think of, trying to think of an example. I think of The Office. That's another one where Pam finds out, if you're familiar with the show, one of the coworkers finds out that the boss is dating her mom. So she goes out, she just screams, she like lets it out. Like, you can do that. And I think especially, I think back to my own life as a man, like I get the messaging of suppress your feelings, but I want to remind you that you can do this. Like, you can let out that scream, and doing it in a controlled way is so helpful. Rather than a reactive way. So that's where, if that tension builds, you can go to that route. Another way you can release that energy out is going for a run, going for a sprint. If you're not into the screaming vibes, like, go and sprint it out. Like, just hammer it out. Another one could be exhaling with sound, just letting that sound go. Could be another great way to release it out. And then talking it out with someone else is another great way to vent out that energy. And then working out, that habit of like lifting weights, just letting that tension go. That's another awesome way to release that energy out. So usually what happens from once you release that energy out is then it can become easier to show back up and put the rep in for the new habit. Because the goal isn't to try to stop that resistance, but to minimize the amount of time between you thinking about doing a habit and you doing the habit, and honoring that messy phase. And when you keep showing up and working on these habits, you're going to then move out of the phase faster of the messy phase. And you're going to get into then the maintenance phase, the safety zone phase, and out of that challenge zone, which is really then helpful, because then you get to be like, okay, where else can I grow then in life? And you start working on new habits to implement. But another thing that you can think about with this is thinking that tomorrow is a new day to reset. So when you're in the messy phase, each day can feel like it feels like a week potentially, where you feel like so much time is in this day. You feel like also if you miss a day, it's gonna completely get you off track. But you got to remember that you are not going to be perfect in this when you are changing your habits, adding new habits in. And so when you can remember that tomorrow is a new day to reset, it then releases a lot of the overwhelm that can come up and the anxiety of like, are you gonna stick with this habit? It can release a lot of the self-doubt that has been built of like, oh my God, can I stick with this? Because you can remember that each new day is a day to reset. And then what you do is you then put out, I'm going to honor the commitment. And remembering, okay, I'm honoring the commitment for tomorrow to show back up and put the rep in. And what can also be helpful is to look back at your past. That's another option here, is to look back at how far you've come. Let's say you've worked on this. I'm going back to the workout. I've worked out for 8 days, and then I have this day where I just can't get the workout in. Okay, let me get ready for tomorrow to reset, but let me look back at like, I was able to get 8 days in. Like, that's awesome. Okay, before that, I couldn't even get 2 days in a row. So you can use the past as those past wins as momentum to continue to stick with this, to notice your growth along the way. And you can document that by writing it out and like documenting it every day of, okay, did I get my workout in? You can also be able to be reminded of it, of like looking back and just looking back on a month or each quarter and just see your progress. That's been really helpful for me, is being able to document it and knowing when I missed a day and when I didn't miss a day for this habit. And that has helped me to move through the messy phase a lot faster. And then the other thing is to understand that you will make mistakes. To embrace the messy phase of life is to honor that mistakes are going to happen. And what I want to remind you is you can learn the lesson in the mistake and then let go of the mistake. They're going to happen along the way as you're moving towards who it is you want to become and the vision you have for your life. And it doesn't need to cause you to have any additional stress and overwhelm that builds because of that can't be released. Because again, that all fuels you to hitting burnout and hitting those red flags. Specifically, the first one of chronic exhaustion, and then the second one of negativity. The other thing to think about is remembering that, let's say another habit, the one that I worked on personally, was wanting to go, like I was going to bed late. So I had this goal of setting a time, which was different. I wanted to go to bed by 10:30 for lights out. What I kept noticing was I was waiting till the last, I keep pushing it later and later and later. So what I gave for myself is to wind down for the night, to be able to get into what could feel like a routine, is I'll try to give myself an extra 40 minutes before going to bed from what I'm used to help me to get this habit back on track, or to get this habit on track. So when you're in the messy phase, you may need to add additional time to give you either at the beginning to do this habit or at the end to honor the body sensations that could come up after you put the rep in. But what's really important to remember is that the messy phase moves you into the autopilot phase of a habit, where it becomes a lot easier to do the habit and show up. There's less friction there. Doesn't mean you're going to be perfect all the time, but it just becomes a lot easier to show up and put the rep in because it's familiar as a habit. And in your day-to-day life, you move through the resistance from the body. So it's giving you hope of remembering that through the messy phase, you're then going to hit the autopilot phase. You'll still have those moments where you may miss a day, it may not be perfect, but you get to show it. It's easier to then show up the next day and get back on track. And when it comes to the messy phase, there are going to be moments that we choose the messy phase, and then other times where it's forced on us. I think of a breakup. If you didn't initiate the breakup, I mean, that's forced on you for the messy phase. And so when you can put the more reps in for the experience of the messy phases that you choose, let's say adding a new habit into your life, it helps then for the body to be familiar with the experience of the messy phase. So then it becomes a lot easier to deal with the ones that are forced on you. For example, a breakup, or if you lost your job or the business closed down, or a pandemic happens, you're then able to have the confidence within you, that self-trust within you. You're able to have more reps filled up in that bucket. So then you can handle what can come your way for the challenges that you're going to face, because we do all face challenges in life that are forced on us that we just have to deal with. And I don't want you to have to then freeze and get stuck when those challenges hit you. I want you to be able to handle those and be able to then honor what comes up for those moments, but then move through them and move on with your life towards who it is you want to become and the vision you have for your life. Because when the body is familiar with it, it then becomes a lot less scary. And from there, you can then move on and move forward with your life. And I want to remind you that if no one's ever told you this today, that I absolutely believe in you and that you are capable as a human being to move through the messy phase, to embrace it when it comes to your habits and creating those habits. And then when it comes to the messy phase that it's forced on you, you're then going to have all these small wins stacked up that you can lean on during the really hard times and the challenging times in those messy phases that are forced on you. So now thinking back to the messy phase that you're in for your life, What is a habit that you are working on right now that you feel is in this messy phase for you, that you want to move to the autopilot phase? When you can identify that, it's then remembering, okay, from what's been talked about today, this is what could come up for my body sensations. I could remember, put the rep in before bed if I'm struggling with the consistency of a specific time. You can take bits and pieces from this conversation and implement that as you're continuing to show up and put the reps in, because you can move through this messy phase of life. And you got to remember that the messy phase of life, there's going to be future messy phases that are going to come your way as you continue to grow and you move forward in who it is you want to become. But you can always come back to this conversation to support you as you continue to navigate those and to continue to create new habits that are going to be able to help you and better your life. You got this. If you like this episode, please don't forget to rate this podcast to help get this message out of Make Burnout Extinct. And you can share what resonates with you from this episode by connecting with me on Instagram or LinkedIn. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this episode. I don't take that for granted. I'm so excited to reconnect again soon.